A casemate, sometimes erroneously rendered casement, is a fortified gun emplacement or armored structure from which guns are fired. Originally, the term referred to a vaulted chamber in a fortress. In armored fighting vehicles that do not have a turret for the main gun, the structure that accommodates the gun is termed the casemate. Origin of the term. The word comes from the Italian casemate, the etymology of which is uncertain. Some think that casemate comes from casa, Italian for house, and matto, Italian for mad, but in this case meaning fake. Casemate seems to have been a common nickname given to a medieval siege machine called gatta, which had the appearance of a house. Others think that it comes from the Arabic word kasaba, transliterated to casba, the word that originated the Spanish word for fortress, alcazaba. Menaggio speculated that it came from the Greek word for pit, casma, the plural of which is casmata. Hensley Wedgwood thought that it came from the Spanish casa and matar, making a casemate a house in which killing happens. Others take matto in its archaic Italian meaning of dark, equivalent to the English mat, as in opaque, making a casemata a dark house. Casemate were also used as military prisons, making use of the lack of light to add to the punishment. This explanation seems to be the most agreed upon. Usage: land fortification. A casemate was originally a vaulted chamber usually constructed underneath the rampart. It was intended to be impenetrable and could be used for sheltering troops or stores. With the addition of an embrasure through the scarp face of the rampart, it could be used as a protected gun position. In the early 19th century, French military engineer Baron Haxo designed a freestanding casemate that could be built on the top of the rampart. Casemates built in concrete were used in the Second World War to protect coastal artillery from air attack. Naval. In warship design, the term casemate has been used in a number of ways. Casemate ironclads. The American Civil War saw the use of casemate ironclads, armored steamboats with a very low freeboard and the guns on the main deck protected by a sloped armored casemate, which sat on top of the hull. Although both sides of the Civil War used casemate ironclads, the ship is mostly associated with the Southern Confederacy, as the North also employed turreted monitors, which the South was unable to produce. The most famous naval battle of the war was the duel at Hampton Roads between the Union turreted ironclad US Monitor and the Confederate casemate ironclad CSS Virginia. Casemate ships. Casemate ship was an alternative term for central battery ship or center battery ship. The casemate was an armored box that extended the full width of the ship, protecting many guns. The armored sides of the box were the sides of hull of the ship. There was an armored bulkhead at the front and rear of the casemate, and a thick deck protecting the top. The lower edge of the casemate sat on top of ship's belt armor. Some ships, such as the Alexandra, had a two-story casemate. Single casemates. A casemate was an armored room in the side of a warship, from which a gun would fire. A typical casemate held a 6-inch gun, and had a 6 inches front plate, with thinner armor plates on the sides and rear, with a protected top and floor, and weighed about 20 tons. Casemates were similar in size to turrets. Ships carrying them had them in pairs, one on each side of the ship. The first battleships to carry them were the British Royal Sovereign class, laid down in 1889. They were adopted as a result of live firing trials against HMS Resistance in 1888. Casemates were adopted because it was thought that the fixed armor plate at the front would provide better protection than a turret, and because a turret mounting would require external power and could therefore be put out of action if power were lost, unlike a casemate gun, which could be worked by hand. The use of casemates enabled the 6-in guns to be dispersed, so that a single hit would not knock out all of them. Casemates were also used in protected and armored cruisers, starting with the 1889 Edgar class, and retrofitted to the 1888 Blair class during construction. In the pre-dreadnought generation of warships, casemates were placed initially on the main deck, and later on the upper deck as well. Casemates on the main deck were very close to the waterline. In the Edgar-class cruisers, the guns in the casemates were only 10 feet above the waterline. Casemates that were too close to the waterline or too close to the bow were prone to flooding, making the guns ineffective. Armored vehicles. In regards to armored fighting vehicles, casemate design refers to vehicles that have the main gun mounted directly within the hull and lack the rotating turret commonly associated with tanks. Such a design generally makes the vehicle mechanically simpler in design, less costly in construction, lighter in weight and lower in profile. The saved weight can be used to mount a heavier, more powerful gun or alternatively increase the vehicle's armor protection in comparison to regular turreted tanks. However, in combat the crew has to rotate the entire vehicle if an enemy target presents itself outside of the vehicle's limited gun traverse arc. This can prove very disadvantageous in combat situations with no clearly drawn front line. During World War II, casemate tanks were heavily used by both the German Wehrmacht and the Soviet Red Army. They were mainly employed as tank destroyers and assault guns. Tank destroyers, intended to operate mostly from defensive ambush operations, did not need a rotating turret as much as offensively used tanks, while assault guns were mainly used against fortified infantry positions and could afford a longer reaction time if a target presented itself outside the vehicle's gun traverse arc. Thus, the weight and complexity of a turret was thought to be unnecessary and could be saved in favor of more capable guns and armor. In many cases, casemate vehicles would be used as both tank destroyers or assault guns, depending on the tactical situation. The Wehrmacht employed several casemate tank destroyers, initially with the still Panzerjäger designation Elefant, with an added, fully enclosed four-sided casemate atop the hull, with later casemate-style tank destroyers bearing the Jagdpanzer designation, with much more integration of the casemate's armor with the tank hull itself. Examples of the Jagdpanzer IV, the Jagdtiger and the Jagdpanther assault guns were designated as Sturmgeschütz, like the Sturmgeschütz III and Sturmgeschütz IV. In the Red Army, casemate tank destroyers and self-propelled guns bore an SU or ISU prefix, with the SU prefix an abbreviation for Samochodnaya Ustanovka or self-propelled gun. Examples of the Su-100 are the ISU-152. Both Germany and the Soviet Union mainly built casemate tanks by using the chassis of already existing, turreted tanks, instead of designing them from scratch. While casemate tanks played a very important role in World War II, they became much less common in the post-war period. Heavy casemate tank destroyer designs such as the US D-28 and the British Tortoise never went beyond prototype status, while casemate vehicles of a more regular weight, such as the Soviet Su-54-122, saw only very limited service. The general decline of casemate vehicles can be seen in the technological progress which resulted in the rise of universal main battle tanks, which unified in them the capability to take up the roles and tasks which in the past had to be diverted between several different classes of vehicles. However, vehicles such as the German cannon and Jagdpanzer of the 1960s still let the casemate concept live on. while the Swedish army went as far as employing a casemate tank design, the Stridsvagn 103, or S-Tank, as the main armored fighting vehicle from the 1960s until the 1990s, favoring it over contemporary turreted designs. Other casemate design ideas, such as the projected German Versuchstrager 1-2 with two main guns, were developed even later. Gallery.